of combat. And so he taught me a couple of the different things that the police learned, but I never put them into practice myself. But I got an appreciation of that kind of fighting there while I was still in the Philippines, and before it had even hit the west coast of the United States. Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So after about 7 or 8 years, you leave the Philippines and you're back to.
I went back to New York and then up to Boston. You know.
Were you in New York long, or just?
No, not after I came back.
Yeah.
I left the pharmaceutical business because I just didn't want to be in it anymore, and Natalie wanted to raise the kids here in the United States, so I decided I might as well change. So I went into the financial business and did that for a few years, and then I was introduced to teaching the blind how to fence as part of their mobility and orientation by Larry Dargy, the former coach of Boston University.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And in the meantime, I was fencing for the fun of it over at Harvard with the Harvard fencing team and with Ado Marion, the fencing coach there. And so.
So about what year is this when you're back in Boston again?
Oh, this was back in 1963, 64, around there.
Yeah.
Right. And they had a big sectional championship here in '64, and I guess I took third place or something like that in the foil. By that time, I was getting to be a pretty old man, as far as competitors are concerned.
This was AFLA.
This was AFLA.
Yeah.
I guess it had just turned to the USFA by that time, and I got my kicks out of that. That was fun.
So you were fencing primarily foil, and you were teaching the blind at that time.
And I was teaching the blind at that time, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how much had Larry developed that blind fencing, and where did you take it from
Well,
there?
he and Father Carroll and the first director of the rehabilitation services, Fred Silver, who had been a pay fencer, all developed this concept of fencing as a means of teaching or strengthening the teaching of mobility and orientation with the long Hoover cane, just right out of the blue. Because of and they all felt that it improved the blind person's ability and skill with the long cane for moving around independently, and also improved their self-confidence tremendously, in a terrific depth of self-confidence, so that this would carry over into other areas that they were learning. Because if a blind man can learn how to fence, you know, where are you going to put the limits on what he can learn?
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
He never had any idea of fencing in the first place when he had vision, you know. And now all of a sudden he's blind and he's learning how to be an offshoot of D'Artagnan, or a clone of D'Artagnan. Yeah. And so that was tremendously effective, and it impressed me no end. And I've stuck with it ever since then, ever since 1968. No matter what I was doing, I could see that it was improving these people, and by this time, they tell me now, I've taught somewhere over 4,000 people how to fence.
Wow.
Blind people how to fence.
How many more?
Yeah. So it's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been very, very fulfilling.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's go back. So now you're fencing at Harvard, and doing AFLA, and sort of in your spare time. Were you teaching? Did you start teaching the blind full time?
No.
Or were you just doing that part time?
No, I was just volunteering my services.
When was the? I know there was one point in your career when you and Natalie sort of talked, and she said, "I think we're doing
after
now.
she got her PhD.
What do you want to try to do?"
Yeah, after she got her PhD in psychology, and
was she studying while you were up here? Or?
Yes, she was studying. Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And she was continuing to study at Boston University. And we were raising our kids at the same time, and then she got her PhD and was offered a position at Children's Hospital in Boston. And that's when she turned to me and said, well, she said, you've been working pretty hard in the financial field, but would you rather be doing something else? And I said, sure. And in the meantime, I had been talking with Ado Marion, and Sylvia Vitale had called me in and said, "Hey, Eric, why don't you learn to become a fencing coach?" He said there's an awful lot of benefits to it, and he explained them to me, how it worked here at MIT, how MIT funded half the college education of your kids if they went to another college, and how they paid for all of it if they went to MIT. And, you know, so I thought, gee whiz, that's not a bad deal, that's pretty good. And then Joe Levis, I found out, had fenced for MIT, and that was exciting also. And it
So
also
Joe Levis was
here-
a big name for you
it was
already.
a big name for me, and I
everybody
had
was
met
saying
Joe
so.
Levis, and
Yeah.
you know, I really appreciated what he could do and what he had done. And so I sort of told Natalie, you know, if it's realistic, if you don't mind, I'd like to learn how to become a fencing coach. And she said, well, how much time do you think it'll take? And I said, well, I think learning from Ado Marion and Sylvia Vitale, it might take me a couple of years to really become comfortable as a coach. And then I'd still have to get a job as a coach or start up a club or something.
Yeah.
And she said, well, we'll be a two-income family, so go ahead, let's try it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. In the meantime, the Carroll Center said, Eric, we'd like you to continue to coach fencing, teach fencing here as part of our mobility training program because Larry Dargy is retiring. And he's recommending you. And so I went to work for them, and shortly after I went to work for them, they had a program of manual arts that they were where they were using tools in the shop. They were using all kinds of tools for carpentry, for woodworking, and for metalsmithing. And I had learned a little bit of those crafts from my dad,
Right.
who had been a master craftsman when he was in Norway. And when he had come here to the United States, he just continued doing it as a hobby.
So he was an architect, but he was also
He was an
a
architect,
craftsman.
but he was also very good with woodwork and
What
clay.
kinds of things did he
and
make?
he made all kinds of things. He made small statuettes. He did city planning layouts.
I see, yeah,
with
models and
models
yeah.
of these things, and he was always making things at home, decorations and so on. And he had his own, of course, he had his own wood shop in the home.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he used to call me in and say, "All right, Eric, I want you to hold this piece of wood and stay away from the sawdust." And I said, "But Dad, my friends are out there playing, and I should be with them." "No, you're going to learn here from me." Okay. And so I couldn't help but pick up some knowledge from him. So then when the opportunity came there at the Carroll Center, and I'd already talked over with my wife about changing my line of work, you know, I said, "Hey, they're offering me this position here now, and I'll be working for the Carroll Center full time." And I said, you know, it's not going to produce too much money, but it'll be a job anyway, and I'll be able to continue with the fencing and so on, learning that. And she said, "Well, go ahead, let's try it." So I got on the Carroll Center staff, and I was there for about 3 or 4 years, and Sylvia Vitale decided to retire, and he asked me if I wouldn't mind working with him, and I said, "No, at this time, no, because I've got this job at the Carroll Center." And then he offered the job to Ed Richards, and then Ed Richards, after a couple of years,